Okay, so glad everybody's back in here. Today we are so privileged to get to introduce to you Jana Magruder, which I know is not a stranger. We're going to claim you as one of our own, even though you're a Texas girl.
It's okay. I'm happy to be part of the OP Club.
Yeah, absolutely. After the retreat, we felt like we knew your pain in ministry when you were doing mobile children's.
Whew.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't take long to... And so anyway, she has written the most fantastic book because of some incredible research that LifeWay has done, Nothing Less. And many of us got to hear her for the first time share about this at the Etch conference last fall. And we talked about this a little bit. I showed you a few slides that she provided at our January update. But if you have this book, go ahead and get it out. She's going to walk us through it. If you did not pick up your book at the meeting last month, then you be sure to pick one up in the back. But Jana, we're so glad that you're leading children's ministry for Southern Baptist. Thank you for all you do and how much you invest in all of us, and to see God work in such a great way is so awesome. So I'm going to just ask Jana to walk us through this session about Nothing Less.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, hi, everybody. I can't see you. I'm just looking at Mark now. So it's hard to interact in terms of seeing faces, which is my preference, but we'll do the best we can. I love this Zoom technology. It certainly has allowed us at LifeWay to do a lot of great things like mobile work and pipe in things like this. So it's great technology, and I'm so glad that y'all are utilizing it because you can have special guests. And so thank you for letting me be your special guest today. There you are. Oh, there's the ceiling. Oh, there you are. Okay, hi. Is it cold? Hello. How's the weather? Is it cold?
Yes, horrible.
I'm ready for the cold to go away.
Yes, let it go.
I'm actually getting on a plane later today to go to Austin, which is my hometown. So it's still a little cold there too, but by Saturday, it's going to be in the 70s, which I'm super pumped for because that's flip-flop weather, which is my preference.
Yes.
So, yeah. All right. Well, for those of you who have heard a little bit about this research, I hope that you'll be able to re-engage and learn something more and go a little bit deeper. And if nothing else, be re-inspired, because I find that every time I even give a talk on this research, I myself as a mother am re-inspired, and as someone who loves children's ministry am re-inspired to get back into the urgency that this message calls us to. So I'm going to share some of the PowerPoint that I have on the screen, which are really page grabs, I guess you could say, from the book. So you'll have those in front of you. If you want to flip with me, you can. I do want to say a little bit about just how this book came into existence. My team and I, right now, many of us are in the throes of parenting children at home. And we had a desire to find out if we could use our LifeWay research team, which we're so privileged to have access to engage them in a study that would help us determine how we could best spend these years while we have children in our household. So selfishly, it began as a parent, as a mom, wondering what I could do and some of my leadership team in the same season of life. That would translate, pardon me, to how children's ministry leaders are working with parents. And for us as leaders to be able to sound this message to the parents who we are so desperately trying to reach. And so that's kind of the heartbeat of the study. We knew as children's ministry leaders that we don't like research books that are just black and white print. They're boring. I kind of want to, if you're like me, you kind of want to know what are those big takeaways? What are those nuggets that I can latch onto? And then if I want to read more about them, I can. So we have an extremely talented art director, Stephanie Salvatore, who is also a mom, who also loves children's ministry, loves the Bible. This was really in her wheelhouse. And so together we were able to take this research and try to make it captivating to readers like yourselves, because we know that that's how we like to digest information. And so infographic, photographs, and of the statistics that we found out. So nothing less is really taken from the quote by A.W. Tozer, nothing less than a whole Bible can make a whole Christian. And we latched onto that even before this book, as we had tried to print theme for the Etch Family Ministry Conference, and we wanted it to be about biblical literacy. We loved this quote. And so it's by no accident, I think, that the research points to just that, and we're going to kind of uncover that as we go. So I'm going to share my screen now, if you'll bear with me, and we'll make sure we can do this proficiently. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there's our cover. And then this infographic actually is an easy way to show you just how the study was conducted. In order to have significant research where people take you serious, you have to have a sample that's more than just asking your friends, or, you know, like me. If you're like me, I meet someone who is an adult perhaps that is just super godly and walking with the Lord, and you want to know, what did your parents do to help you end up like this? That's really the question we wanted to answer and ask. So our research team actually surveyed 2,000 parents, and these parents had to be on the other end of their journey in terms of having children still under the roof. So they were parents of young adults who were surveyed, and these parents had to be Protestants and church. So we wanted a broad sample to see if there were some connections, and, you know, our researchers, being professionals, knew that that was how we were going to find the best results. So they evaluated each adult child's spiritual health and answered questions about how they actually brought their children up. What did you do? Because really, that's what we were looking for. Is there some kind of magical formula or a silver bullet that I need to make sure I'm doing, because this is how you get the results that we wanted, that we want. So in the end, the results came up with 15 predictive scores, if you will, that help us know what spiritually healthy children will be if these things are done. So with that said, I always like to kind of set us up for where we are in terms of our culture as Americans. So we all agree, Americans meaning the larger population, not just taking the evangelical segment out, but just as fellow Americans, we can really agree on these things, that we want to be loving, supporting, protecting, encouraging. You can see that the bar graph is really consistent between moms and dads, all the way down until you start getting to the bottom two. And then you see it really start to shrink, and that should be a telltale sign right there. So in order to be mandatory, it's good to be a mom or dad. Religion falls shorter, falls below 40%. And then a committed Christian falls even lower, below 30%. And so that's generally, agree on a smaller portion of us, committed Christian, or even religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion. 29% say that committed Christian, or even religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say that religion in general. 29% say that influence on, 30% say you to think of the parents that you're serving right now, their behaviors, observing their what they're placing their time in. Can we equate some we serve in our church and Americans and our fellow Christians in general, I guess. Okay, so infographic tells us, where are we looking for advice in parenting? And those of you who are parents, where did you look for advice? 1%, it's our experience growing up. And I'm sure we can all relate to that, because you just can't help but think about your own experience. 65% say it's their own parents. And that could be, yes, I want to do it just exactly opposite than what they did. 62% as you go up is their friends, 58% their spouse, but the two that rank the lowest, any sacred text, and then the last is the church. So when we're looking for advice, we're often looking to other things. So again, back to the broader American population, American parents, you can see starting at the right side of the screen, the 25%, how do you define successful parenting? We already defined what's mandatory in parenting, but what about, how do I gauge success in my own parenting? So 25% of us say that if my child has good values, I've done a successful job. If my child becomes a happy adult, so happiness determines my success as a parent. My child finds success in life, however you define that, would define my parenting. 19% say if my child is a good person. 17% say my child graduates from college. And then 15%, I think maybe we could all agree on this, say that my child lives independently and not in the basement. So that's a good thing. But look at that 9%, which is highlighted there. Only 9% define successful parenting by saying my child is godly or has faith in God. So that should be an alarming signal to us that that's not really what we're gauging success in parenting, is godliness and faithfulness. So it comes down to this. What we're chasing the wrong things. Clearly, that sets us up to have this conversation. We're chasing the wrong things. What are they? Well, first of all, let's look at this. Let's compare Christians to the general American population and talk about purpose. Okay, so these to me are super alarming. So look at that first quote at the top of the screen. Enjoying yourself is the highest goal in life. Who agrees with that? Well, 84% of Americans agree with that, but 66% of Christians believe that enjoying yourself is the highest goal in life. The second one says, you enjoy yourself and find fulfillment by pursuing what you desire the most. 86% of Americans agree with that statement. 72% of Christians agree with that statement. And then really perhaps most alarming to me is that last one. To find yourself, look within yourself. And that's the message that 91% of Americans believe and 76% of Christians. So that's people in your church. That's people in your ministry. That's your friends. I mean, that high of a percentage, we're believing that narrative. To find yourself, meaning of life is to look within. So what are our kids believing is the next question you would want to ask as a follow-up. Okay, so we've set up that we're chasing the wrong things. So what are those things? Well, this is a really long list of items that did not make the list. And so we asked our research team to specifically ask, now, did you do these things? Did you, as parenting children in your household, did you do these things? Did these things contribute to spiritual health? Now, when I read this list, some of these really took me off guard as I'm in my own mothering journey, because these are some things that I really chase, and I have to, stand back and ask myself, am I chasing those things because I'm believing those statements that I just read to you about fulfillment and pursuing what you enjoy most as the meaning of life? Okay. But let me, as a caveat, say at the same time, a lot of these things are very good things, and I'm not here to challenge family dinner at all. We should still pursue these things. What we're trying to show is that we're chasing these things probably in a disproportionate way. So let's look at these quickly. The one, I'm not going to list all of them because you've got them right in front of you, but some of the ones that surprised me and my team. That first one for me was a big one. Family ate meals together at least once a week. A lot of us moms are guilt-ridden when we don't get that family dinner in, which we want, we desire, but we know sometimes it's just not realistic for whatever reason. That did not make the list of spiritually healthy indicators. Scroll down to parents did not screen media or allow media. And again, I'm not here to suggest that you don't do that or that you don't promote that. It's just weighing what is the proportion of what we should be doing. And then another one that we see a lot, I know you do in your ministry, family went on vacations. How many times do we have families who are out because they're doing, they're going to their vacation home, or they're planning vacations. There's nothing wrong with vacations and family time. Those are good. But sometimes I feel guilty if we don't have those often enough. Fun outings, one-on-one outings, those are all good things, but they didn't make the list of indicators. Child on down closer to the end, child playing sports. We know that especially the travel sports and things like that are so big right now, and many of our families are prioritizing those even over church and other good spiritual habits. Even getting good grades, having a job as a teen, the choice between homeschool, public school, Christian school, private school. I've been on that journey of just spending hours and hours of fretting and researching over, should my kids go to this school or this school, and what did we make the wrong decision, or should we move, or all those things that we ask ourselves. So those are the things that did not make the list. So now I know you're saying, well, get to it, Jana. What did make the list? What should we be doing? Well, by far, and this one has to be called out by itself because statistically it's just so far above the other 14 that we're going to talk about. Child regularly reading the Bible while growing up was by far number one. So back to the Nothing Less title, we titled a conference and really wanted to focus on biblical literacy. And then this research comes back saying, yeah, it is about spending time in God's word, because we know that God's word is the only thing that transforms hearts. He's the only one who can transform the heart of a child, our own hearts, and he does it through his word. So I got to tell you, when we got that back, some people think that because, we work at LifeWay, we hired the LifeWay research team to do our study, that it would be free. But, it's just, that's not how we're set up. And we did have to pay a significant amount of money for this research. And so when we got this back, we almost looked at ourselves and said, well, we did. Well, duh, didn't we already know that? It feels like, yeah, that is the right answer. Of course it is. But then, even though it was a simple answer, we had to also take a step back and ask ourselves, but are we doing it? Or are we chasing all those other things first? Are we sprinkling a little bit of Bible reading and modeling Bible reading and reading the Bible to our younger children? Are we sprinkling that on top of all those other things which really take the priority of our time and energy and our goals and desires? So number one by far, reading the Bible. And then here is the full list. So you can see that largest impact at the top is the Bible reading. Moderate impact, which means this was statistically impactful enough to make a moderate list. So child regularly spent time in prayer, which maybe if we were going to guess what was going to make the list, we would say Bible reading and prayer. The second one on the moderate list, child regularly served in church while growing up. I was really happy to see that this made the list in a moderate way, because I know that that's part of my story. If I didn't serve with my parents, then I probably wouldn't be in ministry, honestly. And if I didn't watch them serving, I wouldn't have that model to want to serve. And so this is, to me, a message that we as children's ministry leaders can use to say, okay, parents, serving in church and primarily, and then also for us, for the sake of us, we believe that serving in children's ministry gives such an advantage to parents, because we know that they see what their child, they're studying what their child is learning, and they can take those conversations in a deeper way throughout the week. And they know what's going on in your ministry. They can get more involved. Serving makes a difference. And so I think that is something that we can share with our parents as a way to inspire them that makes a difference. And not only, it's not just us with lip service saying we need volunteers, it's statistics saying, hey, by the way, it also makes a really big difference in how your child walks with the Lord for the rest of their lives, is by, first of all, watching you serve, and then when given the opportunity at the appropriate way, serving alongside you. So serving church is a big deal. And so how do we carve out opportunities to do that?
So Jana, let's just ask the group, how many of you served growing up, served in the church? Yeah. Not surprising, right?
Not surprising. That's right. That's right. I always tell the story about my dad was in ministry. And so we felt, lived up at the church and that kind of thing. But my mom was a school teacher and worked really hard, long days with kids, second graders, all week, and could have certainly said, on Sundays, I'm going to just be in a ladies class and kind of check out and just, learn and be with a community of women. But because she knew she had a spiritual gift, which was teaching, she decided, that she would do that on Sunday mornings. And so because of that, because of her making that commitment and following her calling, I watched, younger Jana was watching her mother prepare a lesson every Saturday night, sitting in her favorite chair with her Bible open and reading and studying. She taught 9th grade girls. She wanted a little bit of a change from her second graders. And so I think that was wise. And then, I would get to help her make muffins for her girls, the next morning, or we'd have them over for lunch. And it was just by watching that modeling of serving faithfully that I knew that as soon as I had the opportunity, that's just what you do. You serve, you use your gifts, you pour in to the church, and we need godly men and women to recognize that. And we're going to talk about another factor where we'll lean into that a little bit more. The next one was a little bit surprising for my team. Child listened primarily to Christian music, that would make the moderate list. was a little bit surprising to us. Some of us grew up in an era where, we were told that all secular music was terrible. We needed to walk the altar and surrender all of our secular music to, be burned or something. And so some of us walked away with that thinking, yeah, but we're not listening to, whatever the forbidden music of the day was, heavy metal, or maybe some today would say hip hop and rap. But apparently it makes a difference to primarily listen to Christian music. And personally, no one has said this, but I think it goes back to, if it is even closely related to Scripture, then it's pointing back to the number one, Bible reading. So we know how contagious music is and how it sticks in our brains, because we live through VBS every year, and those songs stay stuck in our heads until the next songs come out. And but that's the power of music. And so if music has Scripture in it and doctrine in it, and our kids are listening to that, then it's almost like Bible reading, if you think about it. So I kind of think that's the correlation. That's why it makes a moderate impact. And then lastly, on the moderate list, child participated in church mission trips and projects. I was very happy to see that this made the list, because those of us in children's ministry know that missions education is so important, because we want kids to see beyond that American bubble that they live in, some more than others, in terms of even the church being a safeguard around them. How can we expose them to, our communities, not having maybe they have access to the gospel, but they're underreached, I think is the proper language, in terms of they don't know Jesus. And so how can we bring up our kids to have a heart for their classmates and their teammates and their neighbors, and beyond that, their communities, who don't know the Lord. And then beyond that, to have a heart for unreached people groups in other nations, and then the opportunity to participate in that, beyond just exposure to perhaps hearing those stories or watching a video about that. How can they have a hands-on experience in terms of participating in a project if they're young children, and as they grow older, actually going on a mission trip? What that obviously makes a big difference. So I believe Mark and I are on a ski lift, and you were sharing about Gracie and the huge impact that her trips to Poland, right?
That's right.
Had on her. And my daughter, for the first time, went on her first mission trip last year to China, and she's never been the same, because her world was just open to a bigger God, and he's at work in a powerful way all across this nation and all across the world. And we have a role in that, and our kids have a role in that. And the Great Commission is for them now. It's not when they, graduate to student ministry and go on their first mission trip. It's for them now. For those who have made professions of faith, that Great Commission is for them. And so I'm so glad that made the list, because I truly believe, just firsthand experience watching that, and even in my own life, that made a huge impact on me. Okay, so we can keep moving to the smaller impact, but remember all those things that did not make the list. So the fact that they even made the list means that they're important for us to look at. If there's a negative sign, that just means that this is not something that you want to do. It's something that you don't want to do. So that's how they're identified. So the first one on the small impact, the child did not want to go to church as a teen. So some of these bleed over into student ministry. And really that is a message for our parents as well, because do we allow teenagers to make that decision? Of course, there's going to be Sundays where a teenager doesn't want to go to church, right? There's Sundays, quite frankly, where we don't want to go to church. We want to hide in our closets because too many people texted us that they're not going to be there.
That's right.
Or we're tired or whatever it is. But the fact that that teen was allowed to make that decision has a negative impact. So if we're looking at a score, this is back to our research language. If you're looking at an overall score that they get, this would be a point off if they were allowed to not go as a teen. In a positive way, child's best friend was an influence to follow Christ. So it's great for us to know that, because we can foster relationships. Church friends are important. The church that I go to right now, none of my children go to school with their church friends, and it's been actually a good thing, because it gives them a whole other group of friends that they are growing with and have a relationship with. And so research tells us that that's important. So we can foster that in children's ministry, and that's why we do. That's why y'all work really hard to create experiences that kids can do together and grow closer with each other and with the Lord. This is what the next one, child is a female. That's one of those things where it's statistically significant. So we put it down there, but it's really out of our control. But females have, if you're looking at that score, being a female gives you an extra bump into what your overall score is, if that makes sense. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Mark. But you made it. You're good. Okay. Next, this is key for us as leaders. Child connected with several adults at church who intentionally invested in them. So this is a message not only for our parents, but for our broader church congregation family. So when we're asking and inviting people to serve with us, they need to know that it makes a difference for adults, healthy, spiritually godly men and women, to pour into the lives of children while they are in children's ministry and in student ministry. So it makes a big deal. It makes an impact. We know that even kids, like I always say, the Magruder kids, my kids, have a mama and a daddy who are teaching them at home, discipling them at home. But I have a teenager and a preteen right now, and a fourth grader. And especially the teenager and the preteen start getting a little hard of hearing. Y'all may have heard me say this before. They start getting a little hard of hearing in this year, the one that their mother talks into. But this other ear is quite open to hearing what their Sunday school teacher says. And so at some point they're going to realize that that's an echo, that we're saying the same things. And so that's pouring into their faith and their like we said, their overall spiritual health. It makes a difference when adults, the same adult, by the way. So for some of us, and my story includes this, that get caught in the trap of being so desperate for volunteers that we allow a once a month kind of model, one month on, 3 months off kind of model. I mean, I've seen and heard it all just to get volunteers to come. And you may their children reading a Bible story, but do you really have a consistent adult who's developing a relationship with that child if they're just checking in once a month? It's really hard. No, you don't, is the answer. So that's why consistent teachers are so important and so valued. And so I hope you can use this research even to sound that message to the rest of your church body. And I would start with just the leadership table that you sit on in your church staff to say, guys, this is significant. And I hope that we can use this as a way to help folks engage with children and student, preschool, next gen, whatever it is, but all the things that this research, all the age groups that this research represents. Okay, so back to the list. A negative is child was rebellious growing up. You know, you may be raising a prodigal or raised a prodigal. You may still be praying for a prodigal. We know that kids go through rebellious phases, but that is on there as something that takes your score down a notch. Is that. Okay, moving along. Parents typically ask forgiveness when they messed up. And I'm glad this is on here because I mess up a lot. And displaying the gospel and just being real with kids, I think, is important. You know, to be able to ask forgiveness if I've lost my temper, if I haven't paid attention enough, if I've been on my phone too much, to actually take time, stop, and ask forgiveness from my children, and letting them know, you know, I'm a sinner too, and mama needs a savior too. I think those kinds of gospel conversations make a difference, and so I'm very glad that made the list. Next, parents pointed out biblical principles in everyday life, and so that goes back to the parents in our ministries and our churches. Are they trained up enough to do that? Are they in the Bible enough to do that? Statistics tell us that, you know, the current adult population is their biblical literacy is anemic at best, and that's who's raising the next generation. And so that points back to an opportunity for your co-leaders in adult ministry to make sure that the people they're leading and the teachers they're training are helping adults, helping parents stay rooted in scripture so that they can point out biblical principles in everyday life is the language that is used here, but we all know that means disciple your kids. And so in order to do that, you have to know God's word. A negative impact was child regularly listened to secular or popular music. So there it is again as a negative. So it's positive and makes it for primarily listening to Christian music, and it's negative for primarily listening to secular music. So that's a message that we can share with our parents. Next, this is another one that sometimes I make this mistake of saying we can't control this, but I guess there is a way to control this. But child had siblings makes a difference for whatever reason. You can come to your own conclusions on that, but the kids in our ministries who have siblings have an advantage in terms of their score would go up if they have siblings. Doesn't mean only children don't have a chance at being, or boys don't have a chance at being at being spiritually thriving adults, but it's the whole picture. Those are the little things. Okay, and then negative, and we can have a conversation about this too. Family. Every time the family dropped in frequency of family church service attendance growing up had a negative impact on their children. And so this is something we're seeing today, right? We know that 20 years ago, a regular church attender was someone who came to church 3 times a week, which is probably how many of you grew up. It's certainly how I grew up. But now, research tells us that a regular church attender, and when I say regular, that means you're in good standing with the church. Like this family's, they are regular attenders. It means that you come 3 times a month. So we went from 3 times a week to 3 times a month as regular church attenders, and sometimes that drops down to 2. And so every time that happens in a family, it takes your score down. When you say, hey, you know what, it's not going to work out to go on Wednesday nights anymore for whatever reason, travel ball, too much homework, mom and dad's work schedule, whatever that is, every time you drop in the frequency, it makes it a negative impact. And we know that that is reality today. So, okay, so that is the list. And I want to pause now, Mark, if you want to see if there's questions specifically before we move along.
No, I think that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and ask Emily.
So this is what the parent said.
Can you hear her?
I think so, yeah.
This is what the parent said was the biggest impact, correct? Did they go back and then ask the child what they felt like was the biggest?
No, this is just a broad view of parenting practice.
Okay.
Parenting practices, yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, someone else? Brandon.
I'm still confused on the difference between the parenting practice and the child. I guess what I'm trying to say is how was the information obtained?
Right. So
How were the parents involved?
I'm not sure, but let me just try to answer. So you're talking about the parenting practice, but you were asking kids who grew up, left home, this is what was the contributors to them returning to become church goers, serve, be active in church.
But just the parent's viewpoint of that, correct?
Was it just
Yes.
the parents' viewpoint of it?
Yes.
So, but the result was the families that the children chose to come back to church after in adulthood.
And so in the study, the child grew up, left home, in church, and researchers asked the parents about it.
Yes. What do you think was the contributors to your child being a person who came back to church?
Right.
It's true, and
Or
I.
never left,
Oh, go ahead.
or never left, or we only looking at
Or
it?
never left. They
Right.
always were participating in church.
Right.
And some go to college. That's a whole different time
Right.
period.
Yes.
But they're established adults in church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Right.
glad you asked Brandon to help clarify
No.
that.
It's
Good.
clarified.
Anybody else? Very good. Very good. We've got 5 more minutes. We don't want to shortcut this any because it's so good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. So if you choose to use this with your families, with your staff, this page in your book is probably the best summary of looking at a full view of the 15 indicators. So you have on the left the negative influences that we talked about, and then on the right you have the positive ones, which there's 10 positive ones. If you just wanted to simplify your list and just talk about 10, you could do that. They're color coded by just the impact, so the largest impact, moderate impact, and smallest impact. So you can see how that charts out as a summary. Okay, so now let's talk about what we're doing at church. This research, which is a different, by the way, this is kind of several LifeWay Research studies put together to add narrative to the book, so that we can kind of set up why we're here, and then also set up what can we do about it. So what spiritual activities are kids doing the most? You can see that the church related activities top the chart, which is good news for us because that's what we're pouring into. But knowing what we know now about those indicators being, the top one being Bible reading and the second one being prayer, those are more at-home pieces. So you can see this particular infographic shows in color kind of the stronger ones. So 62% attended Sunday school or small group, 54% attended vacation Bible school, then 50% attended youth group, and then so forth. Participated in church activities, regularly attended children's worship, and then church camp, serving starts to gray out a little bit as we and shrink. Participated in church mission projects, then 29% regularly read the Bible, and 28% regularly spent time in prayer. So I think that for us is just a reminder to make sure that we are modeling those things and incentivizing in healthy ways those things at church. So are you when you do your training, when you work with your volunteers, your teachers, are you helping them understand the value of, especially as the children are getting older, of, hey, I want to challenge you this week to get in, the Word. So I teach 5th and 6th grade girls, and I challenge them every week. We do Explore the Bible, and so usually there is a gap of scripture, but several books that we didn't cover before the next lesson. So if we're in the book of let's just say Genesis, and one lesson was in the first few chapters, but the next lesson was going to be on into the middle of Genesis, I'll challenge them to read those books in between and take notes and highlight and underline in their Bibles. And if they can show that to me, I actually give them a little prize. I know that could be a controversial subject that we could debate, but I'll give them a little prize. And then what I find is that it's contagious. If Addison is going to always do it, then all of a sudden that means Caroline wants to do it too. And then all of a sudden we're all reading the Bible. Great. So I realize that different age groups, the female advantage, let's acknowledge that. Because, if we're just generally speaking, my husband teaches the 4th and 5th grade boys, and he's tried the same strategy, and for some reason none of them come back and have read anything. And it doesn't matter if there's candy or anything involved. It's just like, oh, I forgot. But that's another topic. Okay. So, but what are we doing to promote Bible reading at church? So maybe it's even carving out some time to read the Bible at church so that you can train your leaders to model it for the kids. And certainly what we can do is work on Bible skills, because we know that kids aren't going to read it at home if they don't know their way around to how to use it at all. And so that certainly is something that we can and should incorporate in our sessions that we do in small groups. We can't say, well, that's for Bible drill, because we just talked about the church rhythms changing so much. Often the majority of the time we're going to see our kids is in that one primary teaching hour. So we better get Bible skills in some capacity done in that time frame. Same as missions education. You can see that only showed up as 27%. So if we're losing them during a missions hour that your church may have or historically have and don't have anymore, since we know now that makes such a difference, how can we incorporate missions to some capacity, even if it's monthly, in our primary teaching hour? If you give kids 2 hours on a Sunday, maybe you have a worship hour for kids, then, can we use that time to engage children in Bible skills and missions education?
So I just want to say that this biblical literacy project that you have brought to us, actually, I heard you bring this up a year ago, and now with all this research, I mean, it's undeniable. And I have even pushed in our church that this will be the year of biblical literacy, and trying to equip our teachers with what we could do in the classroom in order to accomplish biblical literacy, because we're going to have to review and practice some of these things that we're learning each week, or we're going to get the stories wrong, which we see kids say the wrong thing a lot, and it's cute, but it's wrong.
It's wrong.
And by the way, I'm all for incentivizing anything we can to help us get in the Word. So, hey, will you switch the screen back? I want to just say to everybody, I'm going to discuss about how we're going to practice the biblical literacy part in our church. I'm going to go over that next month at the coffee talk time from 9 to 10. I'll give you the steps of what I'm actually doing with our teachers and how we're practicing that, because we're not only trying to do it in the classroom, but we're trying to push it home, so that at home is connected with what we're doing, how they can follow through with it. Because we all know that those pages, the send home pages, are really just a trail that lead you to the children's department. Laying on the floor. Or it can be.
We work really hard on those.
I know. We want them to go home. That's why we get them and send them home. Well, Jana, thank you so much for all of the research, the work, the authorship of putting this together. I love the infographic. It's such a great way even to take a page and say to an adult Sunday school class of parents, hey, what do you think about this? Look at these statistics. And I could see them discussing that and discovering the importance of it even on their own if we would just supply some of this data to them. I think it'd be great.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your leadership. You are awesome.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Anytime. Thanks, everyone.